Essam, thank you so much for joining us. Just begin a little bit by asking you about your research that you're presenting here.
Well, I was here to present about this paper that we worked on, the impact of climate change on fisheries and its implications for food security in Africa. Essentially, the whole argument behind this paper was, one, we all now understand the importance of fisheries when it comes to food security. A, it's a source of food. B, it's a source of employment. It generates employment as well. And three, it generates revenue or cash to the government of the country. Then they will be able to import food when needed. So that's why there's very significant importance of fisheries. But nonetheless, we have always neglected that sector, and we have failed to mainstream that sector of fisheries in our national economy planning. And this has led to the depletion of the resource, and compounded with the impact of climate change, then the sector is really declining, or fisheries as a sector by itself is really declining. And we also failing to mainstream it into our adaptation policies as well at the national level. So we try to discover, so what's the problem here? The main problem is that because policymakers are not very well informed about the importance of fisheries, because almost 90% of the artisanal or fisheries in general in sub-Saharan Africa is supplied by small-scale fisheries. And small-scale fisheries is not really accounted for in the national statistics. So in that case, governments do not have enough information to make the right decision in favor of fisheries as a sector. So the idea was to unveil or uncover and make it more visible and show governments that this is how much it contributes to the national economy or to food security as a whole. What we did was we tried to look at the production level of fisheries for 44 countries in sub-Saharan Africa, and we tried to correlate that against the prevalence of hunger or poverty. And we found this very clear indication that the more fish you produce, the less the prevalence of hunger is. And those countries with very limited fisheries resource, or with very low production level, they have very high prevalence of hunger and poverty. This is one of the indications that we found, and we were trying to highlight, okay, so this is just, as long as just to make sure that it's contributing. So through this research, what we're trying to highlight is that, okay, we have shown the statistics which shows the importance of fisheries in poverty reduction. So if we make that case and we communicate it properly to policymakers and make a case telling them, well, this is how important it is, then policymakers will be in a position to be able to make the right decision in favor of fisheries as a sector. And the importance is that we all know or understand that most of the people who are dependent on fisheries are the poor or the poorest of the poor. So we need to have as well the systematic and positive bias in favor of the poor. So,
how you say that small-scale fishermen are being affected? How are they adapting?
That's a very good question. When some of the impacts of climate change on fisheries, even though there's very limited knowledge on that, especially in sub-Saharan Africa, there can be multiple ways. There can be some physical and biological change, and some of the factors is going to be fish are more likely going to move to optimal environment, because fish have very limited maximum threshold that they can tolerate when it comes to salinity change or acidification of the ocean, temperature change, and all that. So as they migrate to other optimal environments, there will be some winners and losers. And the winners for sure are those who have the capability, who can chase the fish and go and fish where it is. But the problem is when it comes to small-scale fisheries, they don't have the financial or technical capacity to go and follow the fish and harvest the fish. So it becomes financially or economically more prohibitive for the poor to be able to harvest fish.
What's the response of international non-governmental organisations, of governments? How are these communities being supported?
Well, that's the case, say, because in most of the cases they are being neglected really, because as I said earlier, policymakers do not have enough information to recognize the importance of small-scale fisheries in sub-Saharan Africa especially. And our job now has to be to make a case to show them how important, how significant that sector is in the first place. And once the governments recognize that, and they will have a tool, they have to have sufficient information to be able to make decisions. The reason why I'm saying this is that because policymakers are in this situation where we have this very limited resources, and you have to have this, it involves some sort of trade-off when you allocate resources, financial resources, for example, into different activities and different sectors. So if they have the information that tells them or informs them this is how important it is for the national economy, this is how important it is to contribute to poverty reduction and boost food security, then they will be in a very suitable and confident position to say, well, okay, we'll be giving priority to artisanal fisheries.
Essam, thank you very much for sharing your research. It's really interesting.
My pleasure indeed. Thank you for having me. Yeah.